Tyfano, Unravelling Data Mysteries. Join Paul, Joe, and a diverse array of expert guests on Tyfano, Unravelling Data Mysteries, a podcast dedicated to exploring the intricate world of data, insights, and AI. In a realm where talk is abundant but true mastery is rare, we delve deep into the complexities of data science. Our mission is to celebrate those who excel in transforming data into genuine understanding and actionable insights. It's more than just data talk, it's about putting data to work in the real world. Whether you're a data enthusiast, a professional in the field, or simply curious about the power of data, Tyfano offers enlightening conversations and valuable insights into the ever-evolving world of data. The name Tyfano for the podcast has a unique and quirky origin. It traces back to the founders of Tesco, one of whom was John Porter's father. John was a close friend and founding investor in my company Beyond. During the early days of Tesco, when the founders were unsure about the origin of a product, they would exchange a knowing look and say Tyfano, which was their shorthand for fuck Tyfano. This phrase, born out of a light-hearted moment amongst colleagues, encapsulates the spirit of honesty and humour in the face of uncertainty, making it a fitting and memorable name for a podcast that aims to unravel the often perplexing world of data and AI. This is the aperitif for the main podcast series and introduction to Joe and I. In this one, we're going to talk about a few things, but just give you some highlights of what we're going to be talking about in more detail through the rest of the podcast series. The first bit is, data, and there's loads of it out there, not a lot of insight, but lots and lots of data. And the power of the untapped data that we all have access to these days.
And you're going to be telling me what the 99% is.
Yeah,
you're going to be telling me about the hidden treasure trove that lies within.
Yeah, so I think there is, within organisations at the moment, there's a vast amount of data that's just not being used. But it's worse than that, because organisations, if they're using their own internal data and their own internal data alone, will just be able to navel gaze at how they do things today. And they'll just be looking at the data that tells them that what they're doing is either successful or not. They won't be thinking about where the future is and where consumers are going. So, and where people are going in life and love and everything generally.
And the answer is 42.
Yeah, the answer is 42.
The answer is 42. Okay, so we're going to talk about the power of untapped data. What else do you have on your hit list for our aperitif session?
I think it's probably appropriate that we talk about data democratisation, how we get people, an easy word for me to say, I've been saying it for long enough and for many, many years, but the power of actually getting data out to the masses and to people in organisations, and to data not just being the domain of the CEO or the CFO. Information is power.
Yeah, or the tech nerds.
Or the tech nerds within the organisation. But actually the tech nerds aren't really interested in what comes out of the data. They're just interested in collecting it and storing it and making sure it's available for use.
Okay, so if I translate that, you're going to talk to me about how we can share data within organisations. So whichever department or your specialism is, you've got a way of asking questions to make use of it.
Key is asking the question.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
And secondly, you're going to be looking about data sharing within organisations to the outside consumer or the outside world. So it's within and externally.
Yeah.
Got that? Okay. Where else do we want to go?
Then what does transformative data leadership look like? How do data leaders, or how do leaders within organisations transform their organisations as a result of what data they have and what data they have access to? So what does it mean when a chief executive is using data versus someone on the shop floor?
Okay. Which means I'm going to ask you questions about what makes a leader. I want to know what inward skills it takes, but also how it can be recognised. Because as leadership should both be delegable, and it should be visible, and it should be authoritative. So that's where I'm going to come back to you on those ones. Right?
Perfect.
You're smiling. Excellent. Right, and then I've got down here case studies in data successes and failures. Why do we expect people to be interested in that?
Oh, only because I need to get some of the anecdotes that I've got in my head out
and
and captured. I've been doing this for a long time, and data specifically for 14 years, and 17 years. and then advertising prior to that. And the amount of examples, I've worked with over 300 organizations. The amount of examples, case studies for good practices within data use and bad practices, I could talk for days.
Okay, let's not do that because we've got 20 minutes.
Yeah, let's not do that.
So on that note, because you're in mid-flow, but this is where I can be bossy, I think we ought to deal with it in order. I think first of all we talk about the scope of the issue. That's the 99%, because that gives us an idea about the size of the concept. Then I think it'd be helpful if we could talk about sharing the concept, which is about information sharing. And then I want to understand about leadership. So out of my 3 hits I want to get out as a taster, that's my proposal for how we
and forget the anecdotes, Paul.
Well, I got a feeling I'm not going to be able to stop those anyway, so they're going to come in.
Yeah, true.
Okay, so 99%. Tell me where that figure has come from.
Over many, many different years and client experiences and experiences within government as well. Data is being collected because people think that they need to collect it these days, and even if it's not going to be useful, or they're worried about not collecting it more than collecting it, and whether the data is the right data to collect. So there's this kind of fear of missing out. So people are collecting data assets and data that they don't necessarily have to collect.
But have they thought about the purpose then? I mean, what's the point of data collection for data collection's sake?
No. Often no. Data collection is being done for data just because at some point in the future it might become useful. I don't really know what it's going to be useful for, but I'm worried that if I don't collect it, it will be outside of my remit. Now, there are examples where, here you go, I've got a case study for you already. An airline that I've done some work with overseas. Their guy who headed up CRM saw no need to collect age and date of birth data and sex, gender data. So when you're sending out targeted emails and targeted messages, and you're telling a 50-year-old to go to Club a Go-Go,
Yeah.
not necessarily the right message to send to someone. Without that data, they are flying a little bit blind. So they've decided not to collect the data on gender and age, which is might have been done for very, very valid reasons. I'm not sure what they were, but it's like, okay, if we're going to do something to target customers and to have an interaction with them, to be relevant to those customers, you need to know, at the very least, something about them that points towards the kinds of things that they might buy from you. They're not going to buy you and I might end up in Ibiza on a stage somewhere, but they're not. The average consumer, and there is no such thing as averages as well, which we need to talk about as part of the podcast. But the average consumer isn't going to be motivated to go to something that if you're in your 50s, you're not going to be motivated to go to a 25 to 30 venue that is pumping on a Friday night. It's just
Well, that's an omission of data though, so that's failing to collect data.
So the result of people worrying that they're going to miss out on data is that they actually just go and collect everything. So whilst that is an isolated example of one interesting person who's decided not to collect that data as an asset for the organisation. Yeah. But there are so many who are in the vast majority of organisations are completely in the other direction, which we just need to collect everything. I need to collect every available piece of information as a piece of data, and then at some point, if someone says to me, that's an important data field, I will have it available, rather than thinking, are we really going to need it? Or how are we going to store it? And how are we going to store it usefully? And actually, if I do store it, what am I going to do with it?
But that just means it's entirely hidden. It's not performing a function. There's not much point simply having it in a data bank if, in fact, you don't call upon it. Is that what you mean by untapped?
Untapped and untapped data. So they're collecting the data. They're collecting loads and loads of information. they're collecting loads and loads of data. That data is not being turned into information, and that's not being certainly not being turned into insight within an organisation.
Okay, now that brings up the question I had, because when I was saying to you I'm going to ask the questions that I don't know the answers to, it seems to me that's the difference between data collection as a science moving it into an art, because there's no function, there's no purpose in simply having data.
No.
It's the use of the data and the analysis of the data that makes it a valuable commodity for the company.
Totally.
Right.
And there is a confusion at the moment of, well, I've got data, therefore I have insight.
Yes.
Or therefore I have information, therefore I have insight. And you don't get insight unless you're asking the right questions.
Right.
So data as an asset is only an asset if the data is being used.
Yeah, okay, I get that. Which takes us on to the next topic very neatly, which is democratisation of data. Because unless you're capable or feel able to ask a question, then you don't have data sharing, you don't have the right questions to be asked of the analyst in order to make use of the data. So what is it that you can offer us about understanding why it's important to share skill sets in terms of data democratisation?
Well, I think it kind of stems from every different stakeholder in an organisation will have a different lens on how that data can be useful for them. And
give examples.
A sales director will want to know the sales figures by store for, if it's a retailer.
Okay.
They'll want to know the sales figures by store. The finance director will be looking at the same data and will want to know the profitability by store rather than the headline sales figures. So
Okay.
those two different functions have access to the same data, but they're looking at the data from a different perspective. Sales director is bonused and motivated by top line sales.
Right.
The CFO is bonused and motivated by the underlying profit of the organisation. Those two things are not necessarily connected to each other. And not only are they not necessarily connected to each other, but they may be looking at different lens in the same data in different ways. So the sales director is looking at sales data that is defined by gross VAT sales or GST or wherever you are in the world, whatever your value-added tax reference is. And a sales director will be motivated by top-line sales figures, including VAT. A CFO will be looking at that net of VAT. So the definitions of the data that they're looking at as well will vary. Okay. And so data democratization,
you got it out. It worked.
It's more about, so it's not just about sharing data within the organization, it's making sure that the definitions are the same and clearly understood by everyone that they're actually the same. We are looking at the same data, we're looking at the same things. So many organizations have different lenses into the data, and then people tap into the data. So the sales director will be tapping into the data that the sales director wants to tap into in order to be able to prove that they've done a good job.
Ooh, okay.
And the CFO will be tapping into the data for the CFO to prove that everyone else is doing a bad job and the CFO is doing a really good job. And the profitability of the business is being driven by cost reduction or whatever.
That's interesting. So it can be competitive as well.
It is competitive.
Okay, so that's talking about it between different levels in the same business.
Yeah.
What about within departments in the same business? So about democratization, not just sharing information across different specializations, but within them, so from junior to senior.
I can fundamentally affect the performance, even not necessarily junior to senior, but also amongst junior individuals. If I know that I'm really good at selling a car, and actually my mate who sits next to me is really good at selling all of the options that come with the car. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So get us to work together.
Yeah, complementary.
And actually we can see that within the data. We can see that Joe's really good at selling the car and Paul's really good at selling the options. Get those two things, and not so good at selling cars, but really good at selling the options. Joe's really good at selling the cars, but not the options. Actually, we can see within the data, and we can actually get those two people to work together more effectively by sharing the data with them, or by sharing the data at a higher level in the organisation and go, actually, if we had those two people working on the same team, things might go better for us.
It also taps in with empowerment, doesn't it? Because if you're trying to buy within the team loyalty to the company, and you're enabling them to feel as though they're invested and valued and they can go higher and further and gain skills, then it seems to me it's a win-win.
Totally. Getting them actually, there is a school of thought. It's not a school of thought that I share. That information is stuff that should be held back.
It's a power dynamic.
It is a power dynamic. I've got information on you, therefore you don't know. So you don't know what's going on. Actually, in almost every example that I could give you, when data is shared, it creates a win-win for everyone. It's. I mean, there is an extent. Obviously, you don't want to share information on other individuals or amongst teams necessarily down to an individual level. But actually, giving someone information on their sales performance and what they could do to pick up their sales performance. Oh my God, that's amazing!
Yeah.
Rather than just going, you haven't met your target.
Yeah, it's not actually giving you the tools in order to improve. It's just telling you what you've not achieved.
Yeah, it's and this is what people. We've done some work with a bank in South America, who, when information was shared, they could actually go, okay, so this branch performs really well selling mortgages. What are they doing? What are they doing that's making them successful? And then tell all of the other branches what they've done, and also make them look like heroes.
Yeah,
because
don't steal it.
Yeah, don't
give it praise.
Exactly, but give it praise. Don't beat everyone else up. Just go, you know what? Mm-hmm. This branch over here did some amazing work. They did some brilliant work. And if you did that, we think that you'd perform better in mortgages. Worked its socks off.
That will work.
Amazing, because it's like you say, it's the process of empowering someone with data. It's not the process of beating someone over the head with a sledgehammer because they haven't hit their targets.
But that takes us into the third topic, which is leadership. Because it takes someone to make a decision that is going to be good globally for the business, and also to have the power to make that recommendation and to have the authority to explain why it's necessary and carry it through. So what is it that makes a good leader?
That was, if I could, one of the best, that was a guy, I'll name the guy, it was a guy called Sandy Flockhart, who used to head up HSBC in Latin America. Amazing CEO.
Why?
Amazing CEO and amazing COO. So the guy that worked for him at the time, they got data. They also got their hands dirty, and they went into the branches, and they got into the branches, and they could get into the branches and talk to the people who were in those stores about how they were performing. And Sandy wasn't a CEO that sat in his ivory tower trying to direct proceedings from a boardroom. And data democratisation and good leadership on data democratisation requires getting your hands dirty. It's being able to know how the front line are using the data and how they are likely to transform the organisation as a result of that use of the data. And the best answers come from the front line. We all know when we go and ask people at the front line and say, what's your problem? They'll go, well, this, and this. If you gave me this, I'd be able to do X, Y, and Z. I
think that's really important, Paul, because the trouble is the further remote you get from the front line, the more the communicators between the baseline and the top line sanitise the information that's being provided, because no one receiving the information wants to be seen in a bad light. So there's going to be a filter on the information that comes to the ground floor, and the higher up you go for different agendas, the more filters you have, which means by the time it gets to the top, it's blinded. with the number of different lenses being placed on it. So what I'm learning from that is you cut out all of those filters in order to make sure you get the unadulterated full beam on how the industry is functioning and what's making it work and what's making it work not so well.
Yeah, there's an organizer, grocery retailer. Sorry, I've gone for an anecdote again.
Yeah,
but there's a grocery retailer in the UK that I kind of knew that they were losing their way when I heard that the board were talking about our respective partners don't shop within our own stores. They shop with the competition, and the competition is more premium and it's more upmarket than our stores are. And you kind of know at that point that the organisation has lost its way. If you're not, and maybe this is my background in advertising coming to fore, but the brands that I loved working on when I was in advertising, British Airways, One World, Apple, are the brands I buy today.
Yeah, okay.
And they're the brands I'm passionate about, and I'll give them feedback, but the brands I'm passionate about.
Feedback is a gift, yeah.
But if you as a board are not drinking your own Kool-Aid and shopping your own store or getting down to the front line and talking to the staff about what's going on, you are never going to be able to ask questions of the data to be able to understand how to make the business perform better. And you're never going to be able to have conversations with the people at the front line to be able to go, what could we do better? They know the answer, and it's just about the data. There's another one. They're coming thick and fast now. I'll stop. But there's a grocery retailer in the UK as well. We were given a sample of data. We run this business. We were given a sample of their data, and five organisations were given a sample of their data. We were one of them, and we were asked to analyse the data and tell them what was wrong with what was wrong with the stores. And we analysed the data, and we could see that there were some patterns of irregular behaviour within the data, which we thought that's the answers that they wanted to give. We were the only organisation of all five organisations that were given a sample of the data. We could have just given it to our analysts and say, analyse the data and tell us what's wrong. We were the only organisation that went and visited every single one of the stores.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And looked at what we saw within the data. And not only that, we went and talked to some of the store managers. In fact, all of the store managers. There was one store in Salisbury that looked like it wasn't selling. It was a grocery retailer. It looked like they weren't selling any wine. And we went, well, actually, if you look at the rest of the store estate, it looks like they sell a lot of wine. And when we went to the store, spoke to the store manager, and he said, well, come with me. And we walked with him down to the to the wine aisle, and it was full of shopping trolleys because no one had anywhere to park their shopping trolleys whilst they went to the cafe.
Yeah, okay.
And unless it was in the wine aisle. They were all parked in the wine aisle. So you couldn't get to the wine because it was chock-block full of wine. All of the data in the world
would not have revealed
that as what was actually happening in store. So you cannot have this is the art and the science. You can't simply look at data without being connected into the art of how the business is operating.
It's a way of adding colour to what is otherwise black and white. It's a way of seeing context.
Yeah.
Because the data can only provide you with clues, but then you've got to understand how those clues can be answered by looking at the context. So coming back onto what is a leader then, so it's initiative. All right, it's being prepared to do more than the basics. It's about being creative. It's about being prepared to be visible and vocal, seems to me. What have I missed?
I think there is something there. I'm struggling to articulate it. It is not allowing data to be hidden.
Okay.
So there is, even if it's sharing bad news.
Oh, that's a good one.
Don't hide it.
Don't sanitise it.
Yeah, because often data is hidden because people are trying to present the best. It's like, on Facebook, everyone's happy and they're always having fun and they're always doing brilliantly.
You use Facebook? You do realise
no, I
that's,
don't
you
use
know.
I don't use Facebook, but or several other platforms that shall remain nameless. But it's not always sunny in Philadelphia. There is stuff that goes on that you actually just need people to surface and tell you the truth about what's going on as well. So creating a culture where actually I need to know the data, even if it's bad data or it's bad news, is really, really important. And that, I think, is the ultimate test of true good leadership in this space. Because if you're not prepared to face into the bad news, then the good news will only tell you the good until you go out of business.
And someone else will spot the bad news, so it may as well be you that then's got control over the outcome.
Yeah.
And you can shift and change it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that. So who else, if you want to name, if you're thinking about other people that could be iconic, I'm not going to mention you, even though you have been in the hot list a number of times, because that's just sycophantic. But what about personal skills? So in terms of, does it need charisma? Do you have to be driven? Does it have to be the only thing in your life? Is there a reason why leaders have to be limited in their scope and field?
I don't think so. I think the best leaders are the leaders that, the nicest person in the room is often the CEO. Because the CEO is not climbing up to the top or not trying to fight everyone else to the top of the table.
Right.
But the nicest person in the room is often the person that needs everyone to be collegiate, needs everyone to be working together, and needs everyone to be sharing information and challenging each other. So that nicest person in the room needs to be the person who's getting out there and talking to everyone.
Right. Which comes down to being inclusive.
Yeah. Inclusivity. I think there's a ultimately someone needs to make the final decisions on things, but being collegiate is really important. Giving away the crown jewels is really important to not do as well. I've seen a couple of collegiate examples where people have kind of just obfuscated the responsibility for data to other people, and done that by being collegiate. And I think that data is pretty bloody important these days. So don't think about giving it to other people before you really have grappled it yourself. And I'm talking mainly about marketing.
Okay.
I think marketing directors have been slammed marketing teams have been slammed for lack of use of data, and control. Marketing used to be front and center in most organizations in the boardroom, and over years they kind of let that control go away from them. Because they were kind of going, well, I don't really know, everyone talks about what 50% of my advertising is working. I just don't know which 50%. That's no longer an excuse anymore. Okay. And, marketing of any team needs to wrestle back control, having given it away to other teams like the finance department and all of those things. They need to wrestle back control of data and the data that they have access to.
That brings us back full circle, actually, because we started off on the 4 topics you thought would be useful to talk about, which was the value of data and understanding what it is, and making sure you ask the right questions and you know what its purpose is. So that seems to me a neat bookend to what you've started off discussing. So do you want to tell anyone listening what you've got in mind for any of the future episodes, or if not now, where they can find it?
So we are going to talk about everything from ethics to from good ethics to bad ethics to data democratisation. We are going to get some people in to have conversations with us as well, some people on the front line. Clients, should they wish to expose themselves to really kind of the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about every topic from AI to, and I'm going to use a lot of buzzwords.
Okay.
And
I
know
no
I'm going to be
doubt.
checked on those buzzwords as well. But we're going to talk about every topic to do with data, the collection of data, the insight that can be derived from data. And I really, really do want to focus in on actually how you translate data into into something that is tangible within an organisation. A lot of organisations are collecting data, but they're not seeing data as an asset.
Okay.
And I think, by organisations, we're going to be expansive. I know I've talked about a couple of corporates, but we're going to talk about people like the NHS. We're going to talk about things like, we'll talk about the third sector, particularly with use of data within charities as well. So we're going to have some fun.
We can have some. And if anyone wants to contribute by asking questions, they can do that. So we've got a checklist of things to come back to. You're still okay with that?
Absolutely. So any question, no question is off limits, and feel free to ask anything and also comment, not just ask questions, but also give us some constructive feedback on things that we've handled badly or well.
Oh, okay. risky, but okay, there's the invitation there.
Yep.
Good. Anything else you wanted any listener to know before we sign off?
No, thank you for joining.
Pleasure.
Thank you for asking some fairly in-depth questions at the top of the conversation.
Paul, I've only just started.
I know. But no, we're really looking forward to it, and we're really excited about doing more of these.
Good. Excellent. Well, thanks for sharing the time.